by taking Class B, Class C assets and repackaging them in a way that's very attractive to today's generation of consumers, to young people that don't want to sign 12 months leases, that don't want to commit, that want to live this flexible lifestyle, that have no idea how to print out a residential lease and sign it on paper, who want to use their cell phones to do this. By taking and repackaging this asset in an attractive way for this generation, we typically are able to generate 20 to 30% increase to whatever owner was making on an open market.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB & Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 337. I'm always fascinated at how technology and innovation can disrupt the traditional way of doing business, especially in the rental property and real estate investing space. Proptech is a term that's used frequently to describe this innovation, and it can be applied in many ways. Today's guest started a proptech company whose mission is to challenge outdated practices to improve the rental experience for tenants and small mom and pop landlords. As a serial entrepreneur in the real estate space, Daniel Mishin founded June Homes to create a substantially better renters experience for thousands of tenants across New York City, DC, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Boston. Daniel also secured over $50 million in funding from venture capital and angel investors. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Brian, great to be here. 336, 337. That sounds impressive. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, that's over 6 years of episodes there every Monday.
Thank you for doing this.
You raised $50 million for June Homes. That's impressive. But before we even talk about that, tell us a little bit about your background. Do you come from the startup space or the real estate investor space or both? Fill us in.
Really, I started my journey in the world of real estate at the age of 11 when I converted my grandmom's apartment in a youth hostel, like backpacker hostel in my hometown in Ukraine. She had no idea that I'm doing this. I essentially just there was a vacant apartment and I just converted it into essentially a youth hostel, put a bunch of bunk beds, put it on the internet. And I thought it's going to be a summer project. I'm just going to make some quick summer cash, buy a scooter that I really wanted to buy. And, that's going to be it. But I ended up building that into a company that I sold 10 years later to a large private equity fund. I sort of spent 10 years of my high school, college, university, MBA building this company that was, I was living and breathing it. And it was a beautiful company. It was called Planet of Hostels. And what it did is it converted commercial and residential real estate into a new generation of youth hostels across Eastern Europe. And we became one of the leading operators in that part of the world. We built, beautiful locations, and we operated youth hostels in 13 different cities. So I started a company at the age of 11. I exited at the age of 23. And I thought I'm never going to start companies again, and I'm never going to do real estate again. I was exhausted. I wanted to live a normal life, go and get a normal degree and basically just spend time with my wife and do all the fun stuff. So I joined this investment fund to lead their proptech investments. So I thought, okay, I kind of know real estate pretty well. I thought I did. I kind of know real estate pretty well. I kind of understand how technology and investment works. Let me go ahead and sort of merge the two and join an investor job. So I did that for about a year, got really deep in proptech, got really deep in what's going on with innovation in real estate across the world. I saw a company in China called Zroom that went from zero. Essentially what they were doing is they were a tech-enabled residential real estate brokerage, and they went from 0 to 2.5 million apartments on their platform in 5 years. And they literally became the largest residential landlord in the world in 5 years with venture funding by using technology and basically land grabbing and blitz scaling their company across Chinese cities. And when you see the change of that magnitude happening and how technology really impacts real estate, whether or not it's commercial or residential or warehouses or delivery, it's just such a massive asset class. It is such a big opportunity, and technology can do so much good here that I just thought, hey, like I really want to go back into the game. I didn't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I knew two things. One, I wanted to do in the US because that is one of the biggest residential rental markets in the world, and it was just fascinating how things work here coming from Europe. And two, just thought that I want to be a founder again. So, and that's how I started June.
Let's start with the youth hostel business that you started out of your grandma's home. Were you disrupting the youth hostel business right there? I mean, what did you do differently than all the other thousands of youth hostels across Europe?
Well, that's funny. Like, actually, when I started it, it was literally like the third youth hostel in Ukraine in the entire country, and it was the first one in my hometown. So there was not a lot of disruption required. All you really had to do is just put it on the internet. And remember, that's back in the days when, in order for you to use internet, someone else had to hop off the call. So like you could use the dial-up internet for a couple of minutes, and then like my mom would be like, "Hey, get off that internet thing. I need to call my friend." That was internet back then. It was really just the power of the platforms was just massive, and no one really used it. I mean, we put it online on Booking.com, Expedia.com, and a couple of other websites, and literally in 3 months we made 3 years worth of rent, just because we were accessible and available to international travelers, and most other accommodation types were not. So I wouldn't call it too much of innovation or too much of a disruption. All it really was is just take something that's offline and make it a little bit more online.
So by putting it online, you made it more accessible. This sounds like an early precursor to Airbnb.
It's funny, like actually Airbnb existed in Eastern Europe like way before Airbnb existed here. It was obviously, here's how I think about it. I mean, I think Airbnb is an incredibly innovative company. And the way I think about it is they're not innovative in an idea that someone else could stay in your home for a couple of nights. I don't think that's really where the innovation is, because people have been doing that for ages. When I was a kid, I remember, like local hosts essentially walking to a train station. They had a cardboard sign saying, "I have a room for rent. You can rent it right now." What it was a peer-to-peer platform for people to rent. And it was offline, but it was the exact same principles. You rent a room in someone else's apartment, in someone else's house. What I think Airbnb's innovation really was all the social mechanics about it. They were the first ones to give like millions of dollars in insurance and safety to hosts. They were the first ones to introduce the ratings, the reviews, guest pays before they move in, a host receives the money after move-in. All of those little things, they sound like they're not important, but they actually are. That's the real innovation of bringing trust and safety to this sector. And oh my God, why am I advertising Airbnb? June Homes is such a better company.
Let's talk about what you're doing, because you swore it off. You weren't going to do any more companies in the real estate space, but then you founded June Homes. What were you trying to disrupt? First of all, what do you even do in June Homes? And what is the problem you were trying to solve?
Let me start with sort of what triggered me to even start the company, and then I'll sort of explain what is the business model today. But bottom line, I arrived to New York. I thought I'm successful back in my home country. I thought that, renting an apartment is not going to be an issue. And then I went through terrible apartment renting experience, getting rejected by brokers not showing up to showings, owners taking forever to approve tenant applications, all the things that a typical tenant deals with. But when you're international, they're much worse. So essentially, I couldn't believe how broken that experience was. Why do I have to carry my own couch if I want to move between apartments? That's just not a thing. Like no one, that was the first time I saw that in my life was in New York, because in Europe, everything is furnished. I mean, majority is furnished. So I'm like, hey, why do I have to carry my own couch if I move between apartments? That makes no sense. Why do I have to pay 15% to a broker? That makes no sense. Why do I have to pay first month security deposit? And when I move out, the amount of time it takes landlord to give me back my security deposit is much longer than the amount of time I have to put the next security deposit. So I'm getting cash crunched in between the leases every single time. Why do I have to rent in this arbitrary June 1 cycle where I can only start my lease on June 1? I cannot end it whenever I want. And coming from a hospitality where the hospitality is much more developed in terms of technology usage and business model and flexibility and even pricing. You compare airlines pricing versus apartment renting pricing. Airlines pricing is an art. It's essentially a very complex, very sophisticated, very flexible way of pricing their flights. I mean, it's not perfect by any means, but there is a lot of technology there. Hey, more demand, less demand, more utilization of an airplane, less utilization of an airplane. Tuesday 5 p.m. versus Sunday 6 a.m. All of those things are taken into account. And then you look at apartment renting and you're like, okay, so I can rent for 12 months. So it's like arbitrary lease cycle that may not be actually the most efficient for both landlord and tenant. Two, I'm forced to, landlords are giving away concessions versus rent discounts, which there is a reason to do that with all the mortgage stuff and so on. But reality is, it is not very consumer friendly. It is not an experience that incentivizes consumers to behave in certain ways with pricing. That's why I sort of looked at this experience myself as a tenant. I was shocked by how bad it is. And I thought, hey, I want to use technology to find a way to improve apartment renting experience. And that was the start. And then there was a year of very painful search for the right business model. Trials and errors, things were not working. Your typical story of feeling down by not finding the right business model for a long time, experimenting and learning that something doesn't work. And real estate is a difficult market. It's a market with a lot of legacy. It's a market with a lot of tradition. It's a market that's very established. And it's also a very conservative market that doesn't want to change. So after about a year, we found what we think is a very interesting business model and a very interesting opportunity. One of the biggest insights we had was that your traditional owners that own Class B and Class C buildings are severely underperforming in terms of return on investment versus Class A buildings. So if you own a 5-unit multifamily building in Midtown Manhattan, right next to a beautiful related 15-story luxury condo building, your return on investment is typically much lower. And the reason for that is because your building is just less desirable by default. So what June Homes realized is that we have a good chunk of all multifamily buildings and single family buildings too, pretty much, that are severely underperforming relative to the rest of the market. So what we decided to do is we decided to find a way, how do you take a traditional multifamily Class B and Class C building and repackage it in a way that's going to be attractive to tenants, that's going to increase your rent rolls, that's going to decrease your idle time between the leases, your vacancy rate, that's going to improve your rent collection rate, that's going to improve your overall costs across the board. And we came up with a business model of turning any multifamily or single family rental into a flexible on-demand housing opportunity. So the way it works is, you're an owner, we come to you and we say, hey, Brian, here's your building. Here's how we think about it. We look at your numbers. We think we can increase your NOI by 30%. Use June Homes flag. We will come in. We will perform necessary cosmetic upgrades, create much better marketing materials than your typical broker would, advertise it much better than a typical broker would, implement dynamic pricing and use technology to create much better pricing and much better distribution than what you currently have. And we will rent it to our consumers as flexible, on-demand, customizable rentals, where tenants can rent any apartment for a duration of 1 month minimum, 18 months maximum, where we upsell tenants different services, furniture rental, cleaning, home supplies, different subscriptions, partnerships, and we essentially create bundles for tenants of different services that they could purchase alongside with their rental. And when they sign their lease, we say, hey, by the way, for $350 a month, we're going to furnish your entire apartment. And on the day of your move-in, you will have it completely furnished, completely set up the way you want it. 40% of tenants buy that. And then you say, okay, great. How about we clean your apartment 1 time a month? It's going to cost you $47 a month. Great. A certain percentage of people buy that. How about we offer you a meal plan where essentially we're going to ship a box of different foods in partnership with one of our partners. Every month on the same day, you can buy it 10% cheaper than market because we generated this customer or this lead to our potential partner. And essentially what we've done is by taking Class B, Class C assets and repackaging them in a way that's very attractive to today's generation of consumers, to young people that don't want to sign 12 months leases, that don't want to commit, that want to live this flexible lifestyle, that have no idea how to print out a residential lease and sign it on paper, who want to use their cell phones to do this. By taking and repackaging this asset in an attractive way for this generation, we typically are able to generate 20 to 30% increase to whatever owner was making on an open market.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB & Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. What you're doing there is you're anticipating every possible need that the tenant would have and saying, hey, we can give this to you. We can provide it for you for a premium each month, which is really interesting. And I think that's something that a lot of listeners could integrate into what they're doing with their properties. But let's go back to the model here. It sounds like you're not actually acquiring the properties. You're working with the owners of the properties. And are you doing like a sublease type situation, or what is that situation? And who is paying for the upgrades to the apartments?
Think about us as essentially asset managers. So we come in, we sign a services agreement where June Homes takes the cost of those initial upfront upgrades. So we're the ones investing in it. And then we essentially renovate them, we put them on the market, and let's say we can make 30% more rent. So what we're doing is we're increasing the rent rolls that we're receiving and the overall building performance, and we only take a portion of that increase that we are able to generate. So owners actually start making money on things that they've never made money before, which is, furniture rental. There's really no owners in this country who make money on renting furniture separately, except a small number of hyper luxury buildings where they offer that as a service. But we've made it mass market. We offer it to every single consumer. And now you as an owner start making a little bit of money on that, a little bit of money on cleaning, a little bit of money on supplies delivery, a little bit of money on food delivery, a little bit of money on all of those additional things. And you really have no risk, because worst case scenario, June Homes has filled your building at no cost to you. So we only really make money if we're able to generate an increase to your performance.
What exactly are you disrupting then? I mean, it seems like you would have the traditional brokers, and you're in the bigger cities where people need apartment brokers to find a place to live. It seems like you're disrupting that business pretty substantially.
If we think about disruption, I think it's not disruption, it's evolution. And I think what we're really doing here is we are taking the entire apartment rental process, how it exists today on the market, and we decompose it and reinvent every single element of it. And let me be more specific. If you're a tenant and you go and you do apartment search, typically you do it on platforms. The problem with platforms is that anyone can list anything. There is lack of trust there. You don't know as a tenant what you're going to find, whether or not it's a real listing, it's fraud. So many people were defrauded by different scam artists in residential real estate. So here there is trust. You go to a platform, you know exactly who are the owners. There is my face on that website. There is a list of employees. It's very transparent. People know exactly who they're working with and who they're renting from. And then tours. On June Homes, people can have a virtual tour to every apartment within 15 minutes of them going on the website. So in 15 minutes, with 2 clicks of the button, you're on the video call with June Homes representative who walks you through every apartment. So before you go and you do an in-person apartment rental tour, here you can essentially have a virtual consultation, see a couple of options right away, get all the answers that you're looking for as a tenant, and that converts 30 to 40% more tenants than your traditional in-person tour. Application process. Everything is on your phone, 24/7 leasing center, where you get a response on average within 3 hours. So submitted a tenant application, 3 hours later, you have your response. You're approved, you're rejected. Lease signing, everything is in your phone. You go online, you essentially open your June Homes app, you sign your lease, 3 different clicks, ready to go. And every single element of it is reinvented, and every single process is improved. And there is data science teams that all they do is they analyze performance of our websites, of our apps, trying to find improvement opportunities. And what that does overall is it allows us to rent those units much, much faster than market, with much higher tenant satisfaction at much higher rents. So our average time on market for our apartments is negative 2.5 days. So we're able to rent them before tenant moves out, and we're able to fill them at such a fast pace. Our average NOI increase is more than 20% for our owners. So, and we are able to achieve that by improving through technology every single element, every single process of apartment renting and tenant sourcing.
Where is that spread coming then from that you get where June Homes actually makes money? Because it sounds like you're increasing revenue for the owners. Where is your income coming from?
We only take a portion of that increase.
It sounds like you're putting your funds at risk to improve the property, implement this technology. The owner is still getting paid, getting that increase in rent, but you're just taking a small piece of that. How do you make sure that you're actually going to make back the money that you're putting into the property?
There is a lot of middlemen in residential rentals, brokers, management companies, asset managers, and so on and so forth. And most of them don't have skin in the game. If you look at your typical management company, what is their risk? They really have no risk. They don't guarantee you tenants' rent. They don't guarantee you that they're going to fill the unit. They're basically making their portion of rent regardless of your performance as an owner. Let's look at broker. Your broker gets their 1 month's fee regardless of whether or not market by market, there are a lot of specifics. I'm very generalistic here, talking about the whole country because every market is different. But the typical broker, if they bring you a tenant, they get their 1 month's fee. They don't care about tenant's performance. What if you as an owner pay them 1 month's fee and 3 months later your tenant defaults and stops paying you rent? You're out of pocket on month 1, but you have no guarantee on month 3. To me, the biggest issue in residential rentals is a whole layer of various middlemen that have no skin in the game. All the risk is with the owner. It's not with the bank. It's not with the lender. It's not with the broker. It's not with the manager. It's with the owner. Owner takes 100% of risk. And to me, that's unfair. To me, what's more fair is that every single person who makes money in that value chain has more skin in the game. That's the right approach. That aligns all incentives. When you have no skin in the game, you have very different incentives than when you do. So what June Homes decided to do differently is we said from day one, it's unfair for us to make money at the cost of owner. What we will really do is if we're able to create upside, and we know we are, we have data science, we understand every single listing much better than the market. I have 10 people in data science department. All they do is they build an algorithm that analyzes prices for apartments. One of those 10 guys is top 50 data scientists in the world. Top 2 Kaggle winner, which is the most prestigious data science competitions. The guy who runs the team is a PhD in astrophysics that did computer science analysis for NASA before. So I brought on some of the smartest people I could possibly find in the world to work on this difficult problem of how do you price apartments? Which apartments are below market priced, above market priced? And we've built this team and these algorithms that allow us to essentially know whether or not the owner's building is performing at market, above market, or below market. And essentially, through that analysis, we know exactly what the upside is going to look like with a very small deviation. So to answer your question directly, I think twofold. Part one is June likes to have skin in the game. We only want to make money if our owners are seeing an increase in their performance. We only like to make money if we are able to collect revenue from tenant. If tenant is not paying rent, we're not making money. If tenant is not paying rent, we are guaranteeing owners that we will handle all the evictions free of charge for them. We're taking that risk because we know that our data is so much more superior than the market, that our default rate is much lower than the market. Our tenant default rate is 0.05% on a data set of 6,000 tenants. So we know exactly when tenants default, and we know that the probability is way lower with June Homes than with the market because the technology is so much better. The process is so much more superior. And then we take risk by working with an owner, but we also have data that tells us that this is a very calculated risk.
What I'm hearing you say is that the data, and you have some very impressive people on your team there, the data is what gives you that confidence so that you can accurately project based on the money that you're putting in to improve a property and institute your systems, you have a better than reasonable expectation that you're going to make a profit off of that. One of the things too that stands out is for tenants who may not be looking for the traditional 12-month lease, which is what most management companies are set up for. They could rent for a month, 2 months, and then move on. A lot of property management companies would say, well, that's a lot of extra work for you as June Homes, putting a new tenant in there every couple months. And any vacancy that's caused by that turnover, that faster turnover, is also going to cost money. How do you account for that?
Old school property managers are going to say exactly that because they're used to making 6 or 7% of their revenue, not taking risks and running small companies that are hyper-local. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build a much better way of renting, a much better system, really. It's not really a way, it's a much better system for both landlords and tenants, a system that people deserve in 2022, and a system that's different than the one that was created in 1957. So to me, it's a fundamentally different way of looking at the world that we have than they do. So, but I know it's what any startup founder is going to tell you, that it's a new way versus old way. But let me address your question very directly. So your question is, flexible leases create additional vacancy, additional work, and additional cost. How do you make sure that that it's worth it, pretty much, right? Did I get it right?
Yeah, that it's worth it, and it's not just costing you more money because you have so much more turnover.
I think flexible leases is the future, and it is the number one request that tenants have for their property management companies. Hey, how do I not commit to a 12-month lease? Can I sign a 6-month lease, a 7-month lease, a 9-month lease? We have to admit that COVID has changed everything. In the post-COVID world, people will split time between cities. In the post-COVID world, someone is going to live in New York for 9 months and then move to Florida for 2 months and then travel for a month. Regular people. Rich people have been doing that for the last 50 years or 100 years. They have their Hamptons house, they have their Miami house, they have their London house, they have their Ibiza house, they have all those houses around the world, but they're rich people. They could do that. That's 1% of the population. What's changed with COVID is that mass market is going to start doing that. Your regular person making $60,000 a year is going to be able to travel between different cities. They're going to be able to split time between different cities. They're going to leave New York for the coldest winter months and spend time in sunny Los Angeles for the same time. And they need a completely different rental product. So it's not a matter of like, hey, should I do this or not? It's a matter of, if you don't do this, you're going to be out of business in some time. And I don't know if that's 20 years from now, 5 years from now, 50 years from now, but the speed of innovation is incredibly fast. And at the time when you're standing still, it means you're falling behind. So in my head, it's not a matter of like, do we do this or not? It's a matter of like, if we don't do this, we're not going to be in business. So to me, flexibility, convenience, and on-demand is the way this generation consumes product, whether or not it's an iPhone subscription or it's a rental. Let me start by saying that. At the same time, it's very important to make money. It's very important to build a sustainable business. There has been too many proptech startups that were funded, that raised a lot of dollars, much more than we have, who have completely failed because they essentially didn't build a business, but instead they built hype. We're building a company on completely different fundamentals. We will not do things that are not sustainable because we understand that real estate is a long-term business. And our pricing model, the one that we use to price our units, it's a dynamic pricing model. It uses machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms to price units. In real time, thousands and thousands of different calculations are being made to ensure that every single lease that we sign with our tenants is profitable. So what I mean by that is if you go on junehomes.com website, and you pick any unit that you want, and you say, hey, I want to stand there for 1 month, your price is going to be significantly higher than if you stay for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months. It also depends on when are you going to move in, when are you going to move out, how many other people are looking at the same unit, how many other leases do we have in pipeline? If you're the only person who is looking for this specific apartment in this specific moment in time in Houston right now, and you see this apartment, and you're the only one interested in it, and you want to sign a 3-month lease, your price is going to be lower than if there is another 5 people in the pipeline on different stages, or just clicking on this unit, or just liking this unit on our website. Your price is going to be lower than if there is more demand. So our system adjusts for demand, our system adjusts for move-in date, for move-out date, for seasonality, for duration of stay. There are many, many, many more factors built inside to ensure that our revenue that we've created through flexibility is greater than the cost of vacancy, is greater than the cost of turnover, and is greater than all of the other costs combined. And then we simply build technology to ensure that our operating expenses are reasonable. Our average turnover cost is much, much lower than industries because we essentially use a network. We don't do it in-house. We essentially have a network of local vetted tradesman shops that come in and do the turnover. We don't have to do it in-house. We can create a platform where local handymen compete with each other to provide us with the best price and the best quality.
In addition to the data, you also have algorithms and things that kind of help you dynamically price all these different services. I know you kind of gave a good warning to traditional property management companies, but what else would you advise our listeners, many of whom own rental property, manage rental property? What would you advise them to be thinking of to future-proof their business?
A couple of things. One is, I think landlords are entitled to better service providers than they currently have and a better system that they currently have. So I would demand from your service provider, manager, or broker, or whoever, to have more skin in the game, to align your interests with them as much as you can. So you guys want the same thing. It's very important to have that. Two is, I would say, websites and online presence. Websites are no longer important. What's really important is mobile. Everyone is on their cell phones. So when you design a website, don't even design it for the desktop. Desktop is irrelevant. Everything happens on their cell phone. This generation only uses their cell phones. 65% of all our users sign their leases, find apartments, tour apartments, sign leases, pay rent from their phone. It's a completely different mindset for this generation. It's a shift in how people consume digital products. They no longer use their computers for that. They use their cell phones. So when you design things, think about that. And part three, I mean, look, customer comes first. It's such a generic, cheesy thing to say, but it is really true. At the end of the day, real estate is a long-term business. Tenant extensions are incredibly important for your economics as an owner. You and tenant want the same thing. You want them to stay longer and enjoy their experience. And to me, residential rentals became way too transactional. We got to go back to treating our tenants as our guests and take some of that hospitality wisdom of being fanatic about customer service, making sure that your tenants are happy with maintenance that you provide them. Make sure that your tenants are happy with how you interact with them, that you respond quickly. All of those things are incredibly important. We learned, for example, that our extension rate was 30% faster if our average response time was less than an hour. So we've built a 24/7, 50 people call center. All they do is they work with inbound tenant requests. They process them in less than an hour. They respond 24/7 very quickly, very professionally through chatbots and through different chats and messengers. And they process and filter through tickets. So our landlords don't have to pick up phone calls at midnight about a leaking pipe, but instead they get a professional work order from June that has verified information, that has all this data completed for every single tenant. So be flexible, demand more from your service provider, mobile first, and customer service doesn't go away. It's as important as ever.
How would people find out more about you and June Homes?
junehomes.com/owners. That's our landing page. We have a wonderful sales team. They will provide you with free estimate and free evaluation. You can just send us your building and say, hey, I have this 3-unit building here. Tell me what you guys can make. And they're going to run their analysis. They're going to use our data science algorithms, and they'll get back and provide you with a quote. And if it makes sense, great, let's work.
Dan, I was very excited to have you come on the show and talk about proptech. And what you shared today really it was fascinating, the way you're disrupting the property management, the leasing, the brokerage system, and the advice you've shared with our investors is really invaluable. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here. Thanks.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com.
And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.